any grant writing. There's some of you that definitely have done that, and some of you maybe have not. And just like to know, how do you feel about that? How confident are you in your grant writing abilities? I have to say, I'm just going to back that up with one time I was speaking with somebody who told me that she could write grants in her sleep. Of course, I was just starting out, and I was like, wow, I can't wait till I get to the point where I can write grants in my sleep. Okay, I'm to that point. She said that, I was like, what? Like that's to arrive at that point. Anyway, and then
well, I've lost sleep because I had a grant to write. I can relate to that one.
I don't know if I can write it in your sleep, right? And then what feedback has your organization received regarding its grants and fundraising efforts? Has it been one, have you been very successful? Has it been a rocky start, fits and starts? And have you gotten any feedback from would-be funders or funders that are funding you now? Okay, so if there are any questions about what I've just talked about or what we're going to be doing in the small group, please just, unmute yourself and question away.
And we are going to break out in the breakout rooms. So just follow the breakout room. And for the experienced development people, I think you're in your groups, you're really helpful because you can give a realistic understanding of how it's going and what may have changed. So I'm really interested in hearing what you all say. I think everybody's back.
All right. So what I'd like is
it's 27, just give it 25 seconds. They're going to close automatically.
Got it. All right. Is that everybody? So I think we have everybody back now. All right. So how did that go? I would love for folks to share. So I might, let me tell you, I'm a teacher by trade. So if I don't get any volunteers, I'll call on somebody. So can somebody just volunteer from one of the groups? What's the state of your organization's grant writing muscle? How do you feel about that? Anybody? Jump right on in.
So
Everybody's smiling. I'm gonna
how about from group one? Someone from group one.
I'll go. For us, the state of our organization's grant writing muscles is we are developing them. We are working on it. We are putting together a team. We've received the A2J grant for 2 years, and that really got us started. And now we just need to put our team together and get better and get stronger at what we say and how we write it, and get our details in a row.
Okay, okay, we're going to talk about that. How many funders do you have? Is it just the one funder now, or do you have a few funders?
We have A2J. Is our funder. Yeah, we have two grants from them.
Okay, so you would be in the market to build your pipeline, your funding pipeline.
Correct. We are in the process of doing that. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. So I may come back to you, Allison, at some point, just to ask some of, as we talk about this, do you have some of these things in place or some things that you might want to be thinking about? Okay.
Okay.
How about an organization that has a pretty robust muscle when it comes to grant writing? Pretty strong muscle. Anyone? I did see someone here from the YWCA. Who was that? All I see are names right now, but I know there was somebody from the YWCA.
Hi, there's about three of us from the YWCA.
Okay.
So in my group, there was only two of us that got a chance to speak, and somebody else's mic, Letty's mic, was not working. She did put in the chat that she has raised about 6 million, so that's a lot of money. And we would have loved to hear a little bit more, but the mic was not working. Um, our organization in particular, the Y, what I was saying about it is we have different funders, but when it comes to grant writing, typically it is only one person. So it will be the CAO, the Chief Administrative Officer, and recently also marketing director has been doing some grant writing. What they do, what I was saying is, even though we don't really have an established team when it comes to grant writing, they do go to different individuals, including us who are program supervisors. So different individuals in the organization, depending on the information that they need. So different elements, different parts, sections of the grant. Basically, they will come to us and say, can you, so I'm doing this, this is, the question that I'm answering, this is the portion that I'm doing. Can you give me some numbers, some stories, some statistics? What do you see? What can you share with me that will be compelling in this part, basically? And the other thing that I mentioned is, based on what we do, the mission of the agency and everything, we try to, even though we're sharing numbers, statistics, and everything, we try to include elements that will still keep that, like, that human touch, that human aspect of things, um, even if we're just talking about numbers. But yeah, typically that's how they do the grant writing process. It's usually one person doing it, but they will get information input from different members in the agency.
Absolutely, absolutely. And essentially that does become the development team. A lot of times, yeah, I used to feel like I was just this lone person out on this island by myself, and then I would swim to, to different places to get the information that I need. But then, like I said, what I started to do was create a centralized place where people could put information. So even program directors knew that, okay, that's where I could put the story, because they knew that I was going to be coming looking for a story, an anecdotal story. So there was a place that where all that information lived. And then, of course, yes, there was a document that I also used to use, a project management document, where, because there's so many moving parts and so many different people that you need information from, I would make sure I would convene a meeting ahead of time. Everybody would know. We drop in our names and when everything is due, and then I would make sure I would be the one running around making sure that I'm getting the stuff from the people when needed. I wish, Letty, that I could hear from you as well, because it's an even stranger beast when you start writing grants and fundraising at the 6-figure plus level. It's a little different type of process that one would use. A lot of times when you're going for the $1 million plus grants, or the $500,000 and over grants, a lot of times the grant process is a little off the beaten path. You probably don't use the regular online process that is set in place. And so there you have to start. That's where you do a little bit, as development directors, we have to tap different people and sort of play chess to get that grant in front of the right person, to get that ask. So that's something that we'll talk about on Phil's end, because Phil is our resident senior program officer from formerly
Recovering.
of Chicago. Recovering, I get that. Formerly of the Chicago Community Trust. So we'll get more into that. But so this gives a feel for how you even sit down in front of funders when you're at that level as well. So thank you for that. Are there any questions in terms of the process, the things that you heard come up in your group? Did anybody learn anything interesting that they may want to implement or something? If not, we will move on. Okay, so now that you have your package, we talked about the package, what you would be putting together. Who are you going to put it in front of? What are the different types of funders out there that you would be targeting to put your proposal in front of? And these are the different types of funders are public and private. You've got your foundations, you've got your family foundations, and you've got your community foundations, community trust foundations. And then you've got your other maybe focused foundations. There are educational foundations, legal foundations, foundations that are focused on immigration. So you would be looking for foundations like that. You have your government grants, you have your local, you've got your county, you've got your state, you've got your federal, okay? So those are all entities within the government that you can go to for grants. You've got your corporations, corporate giving programs. When you enter into a corporate giving program, you would be submitting a proposal. These are your banks and your big corporations, McDonald's, Target, places like that. Social enterprise, that's one of those new things that are new on the horizon. I should say on the horizon. It's been here for a while, but it's new on the scene, I should say. And these are groups of individuals, high income individuals who come together, pool their money, and then look for projects to get behind. A lot of times those are selective invites only, but there are ways to get yourself in front of them so they know who you are and then they can consider you. And then you have your crowdfunding campaigns. Hopefully you will all be joining us next week, I believe, for our grassroots fundraising workshop. And in that workshop, we're going to be talking about crowdfunding and how you raise funds that way, okay? But these are the major ways that folks raise money. Phil, is there anything that you'd like to add in that area?
Just to reiterate about foundations particularly, we kind of think of them as a monolith, but they're more like snowflakes because like a community foundation like the Chicago Community Trust is actually a complex organization that makes grant making and also raises money. And the donors to it are involved in a way. They have committees, there's different structures, and then there are donor advised funds that can only be accessed privately, essentially. And then there are corporate foundations where really the bottom line is the bottom line. They want to align with groups that help them meet their business objectives. And it's very clear that that's what it's about. And there's kind of product placements and advertising is almost an inherent part of that. And then there are very much smaller foundations that are really targeted in particular areas of things like subject matter, like legal services, or there's community organizing, or there's startup. They want to do just startups. And then the last thing I would say about the social enterprise thing is a lot of those folks have kind of come in and competed with community foundations in the sense that they're getting a lot of the younger cohort of donors with wealth. And those folks have particular ideas about the world, philanthropy, and things they want to see done. So a lot of them are almost, they take their entrepreneurial thing and put it into their grant making. And so they want to be very involved. And so the way that you have to deal with them is a little bit more hands-on. And as I'm saying, it's a lot of money, but it may involve kind of untraditional kind of ways of dealing with them, and a lot of one-on-one that's more akin to almost individual giving and major gifts, but it's still a foundation. So I just wanted to throw that in. Again, we're in a time of incredible change, uncertainty, as I know we're all experiencing today. So that's what I wanted to put in with that.
Absolutely. Letty, I hope that sort of answers sort of your question in terms of talking about the detail in social enterprise and the values in terms of it being your younger donors, high income. Also, the way in which you interact with them, it's almost a hybrid, like Philip was saying. You attend to them like they're an individual donor, but you do have to submit a proposal. There's almost sometimes like a competition where you have to come and give a presentation. There may be multiple folks giving presentations, and then they may have a
It's almost like Shark Tank, you know?
Yeah,
because that's the culture.
Absolutely.
And they're bringing their culture over into this, which is corporate, but it's also charity, and it has another kind of origin and culture to it.
Absolutely. And that was a type of funding that I had to get used to. It's not the traditional way of funding. The way they ask you to even present your program and whatnot. You're sometimes you're standing in front of an audience of people, given explaining your program for funding. So we also talked about the process, right? So in this process of grant writing, you need to make sure you know who you are sending your proposals to. So you need to prospect research. And there's many ways that you can prospect research. There are databases out there that you can purchase to look for funders. Also where you can look at you can look at organizations of similar, and you go on their websites and look to see who their funders are. And then you can reach out, then you can do some research on their funders to see if these are funders that could possibly give to your organization. Okay, some of the databases out there for purchase are the Foundation Center Online. That's a big one. It's expensive, but for your bigger organizations that have a pretty robust funding pipeline, something like Foundation Center Online is something that they would use. You've got Donor Search, Donorly, Global Giving, Foundation Search, Fundly is a good one, Donor Perfect, Illinois Grant Watch, if you're trying to get things that are local, state. And then you've got grants.gov if you're looking for federal funding. And then there's Forefront, places like Forefront. If you purchase a membership, then you have access to their library of funders as well. I think, Letty, thank you very much. You have SBIR as also a database where you could go to look for funders. And in this, thank you, it's a federal funding site. And while we're saying you're looking for funders, you want to make sure that you're looking for funders that align with your organization, align with your project, align with your program, whatever it is that you're seeking funding. You want to make sure that there's alignment. You don't want to send a proposal to a foundation that focuses on animals when you're trying to, raise money for legal fees. You have to make sure that there's that alignment, okay? If you go to the next slide, Phil, thanks. So, what am I saying? You want to review the funder's website, okay? If you feel that you have some further questions, you can send an introductory email and not if, you actually want to do this, you want to send an introductory email with just a high-level overview of your organization and the program or project that you're seeking funding for, okay? In that email, you're letting the funder know that you're going to call them, either to have a phone conversation with them or to seek a meeting to have further discussion with them around your programming. You might want to send a white paper or a brief overview ahead of time. or you could even send a letter of intent. A lot of times a funder is going to ask you for the letter of intent. You don't necessarily send the letter of intent ahead of time. They will ask you for that once you've done these first 4 things. Then they may ask you for a letter of intent. And then if they like what they see, then they'll ask you for a full proposal. And a lot of times funders are going to give you those guidelines on their website. Okay, it's pretty much, it's spelled out for you. Okay, but this is a way to make sure before, gone are the days of the cold proposal that you just send out, just send it out there to see what sticks. Nowadays, the expectation is that you've had some prior contact with that funder before you send any kind of proposal, formal or full proposal. You've had some contact with them. I'd say at least 2 to 3 times you've reached out to them. So they sort of know that you're coming and they can expect your proposal and they'll know what to do with it when they see it. Okay, so I have to, it's very, very important, very, very important that you contact the funder before you send them any kind of full proposal. Okay.
And I would add that that's to the nonprofit, to the organization's advantage, that you don't waste a lot of time and resources where there's not really a fit. So the letter of inquiry is actually a good form. They usually tell you exactly the questions they want you to answer, and it sometimes it's just like plug it right in, but it gives you a good sense if you have any kind of real alignment with the mission of the foundation to go through that exercise rather than having to do a full proposal to find out that, it really wasn't there to begin with. So letters of inquiry work for the foundations as well, in that cuts down the amount of paper, the amount of stuff that they have to review that won't be relevant. Because, in times like these, people are not following the rules that AMA just put out. You're trying to get the money because it's tough, but it actually does not help you to do things that you haven't researched properly and that you're really a viable prospect.
And that leads right into the next slide, where you got to make sure that you're aligned, truly aligned with the foundation. Sometimes what will happen is, yes, there is some kind of alignment, right? But you might have to change some key aspects of your program to fit their funding. That's not something you want to do. You really want to make sure that you find that proper alignment. I always say it's like trying to fit a round circle into a square hole. You're going to get stuck. Eventually it's going to go far afield, and you're going to have a hard time reconciling your programming with what the funder was hoping to see. Okay, so that's not something that you want to do. It's called, and sometimes organizations will fall into that, what I call that trick bag, when they are desperate for funds. Then they might change or morph themselves just a little so they can get that money. But then in the end, it can come back to bite them. And in some worst case scenarios, if the programming just falls off the rails, sometimes you have to pay the funding back. So you don't ever want to be in that situation. So it's always good to have that alignment ahead of time. And the only way to understand that alignment, to make sure you're aligned, is to contact and get with the funder to make sure that that's there. Okay. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So then after you've gotten your award, you've been successful, you've done everything you needed to do, you sought alignment and everything, you've submitted your proposal through the process, you got all the information from everybody, you got your funding, yay, yay, yay. Now, that's not, you skip off into the sunset, you got your money. There's things that you have to do as a result of getting that funding from the funder. I can't say enough that you must make sure that you are getting your mid-year and your year-end reports in on time. Okay, that's very important because you want to make sure that you can go back to that funder with your head held high and ask for more money. It's very hard to do that when you haven't been in compliance with sending them reports and things on time. Okay, if you need more time, contact the funder before the due date. Things happen. Funders get calls like that all the time from folks that they need more time, but it's better to do it beforehand than after. Okay. Be sure to highlight accomplishments beyond your stated outcomes. Always make sure that you, if there are any, don't make them up, but if you have some, definitely put it in there. If you were only supposed to work with 50 constituents and you ended up working with 75, put that in there and tell them exactly why that was, or, and it could have been a hardship for you. So that could be your basis for asking for additional funding. Or it could have been, oh, we saw that we need to do this for more people, so we want to make sure that we have, so definitely if you went overboard, tell them you went overboard. And then include challenges and how you'll mitigate them for future programming. That lets them know that you're looking at it, you're evaluating your program, you're thinking critically about your program for sustainability and for efficacy. Okay. That just goes without saying. Okay. Articulating your case. So what is that? You have to create this case statement, right? About why you want their money, why they should give to you. Okay, this is part of that package that we were talking about. So the case statement, what is it? It's an outline of these things that must be in there. You have a welcome letter from your president or CEO, okay? Your executive letter, executive summary, something like that. Overview of your program, overview of the organization, your demographics, and some of the outcomes that you'd like to see. It would include your mission statement of your movement, history and background of your organization, demographics and challenges faced by your constituents, the local community. It also is going to give an overview of your key programs. And in this overview, you want to talk about why your organization is uniquely suited to deliver the programs and why they should give you that money, what your measurable results will be, what's your intended results and impact. Definitely, it always helps to get testimonials and stories from your constituents about how your organization has helped them at that high touch feel. And then also always include your sustainability, long-term strategy for 3 to 5. Look, 5 years is stretching it, I would say, but definitely 3 years to show that, beyond their funding, this is how your program is going to sustain itself. And then also you want to recognize your leadership. So always include your who your board of directors are in your case statement. Okay.
I'd like to add, the way to think about this case statement outline is almost like your boilerplate. I'm sorry, excuse me today.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you have it with kind of the most kind of exhaustive, complete understanding of these elements that she's talking about. But as we've just discussed, everybody's forms and foundations are a little different. So you wouldn't want to give them something that they haven't asked for. So this is like your data bank of stuff that you're always updating for, and you're going to use it actually in multiple purposes, even outside of grant writing, if you're doing larger development efforts, fundraising efforts in your organization as well. You'll be drawing from this reservoir of stuff about the organization. So I would say think of it as the boilerplate. But when you actually get to the point of addressing a particular proposal, foundation, or whatever, you want to customize what's in there to them, what they've asked for, the kind of language they use, massage it for the particular purpose that you're using. But
Um,
always kind of have this stuff in your back pocket. Does that make sense to everybody?
Okay, and so when I talk about demographics, these are some links that you can use, that you can go to get demographics when you are trying to explain your target population, the community that you work within. You can get information from the census information of City of Chicago, okay, at www.census.gov, quick facts. Then you have Chicago Community Areas Demographic Info. And then you have the Heartland Alliance, which has loads of data where you can get information based on certain demographics. And I will put that in the chat so that you can pick that up and use that. Any
Yeah,
other
this stuff
questions?
is always great reference material because it makes your proposal, you know, urgent, fresh. It makes it gives the impression that you all really know what's going on in your community, and a lot of funders are have geographic based strategies and geographic. You know, Chicago is a community of neighborhoods. Illinois is a community based kind of state where it's very different from one area from the state to another. And so your knowledge of that and you demonstrating that will align with the funder and the way they think about stuff.
It's almost imperative that all the development directors on this training also know that it's imperative that you include demographics with your proposals. To submit one without it, you won't be getting funding. So it's in person. Somebody said, what about the burbs? I will get that information and make sure that it's put up there, okay? For anything that's state. And with the census information, you can, if you go to www.census.gov, you can get state information, you can get city information, and then you can get community area. It gets as detailed as that. So if you go to the census.gov, you'll get all that information. Okay. Any other questions? Great questions in the chat. You're welcome, Juan. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to be talking about articulating your case. All right, so think about, man, you're going to get on the phone with a funder, or you're going to send them an email, an introductory email about this project, this program, or your organization. Okay, actually, I think it'd be best if you do your organization, because that's really what you would lead with when you're introducing yourself to a funder, is you would lead with who you are as an organization, and then why you think that you and them are aligned, and then here is what you want them to fund. Okay, so that's articulating your case. Did I miss anything, Phil, in terms of that? In terms
That's
of,
good.
okay. So you're going to pitch to your peers, okay? What are the demographics or issues your community is facing, or what are the issues about? There, you're going to look at, you could go to somewhere like the Heartland Alliance to get some information like that, right? You're not going to do that now. Most of you already know what those issues are, but, or how many families are need legal fees for immigration, or how many families took advantage of that over the last year of 2021 or 2020, or you'll be able to get that information from places like that, from links like that. So why is your organization uniquely suited to deal or solve with the pressing issue, whatever that is? And what is at least one compelling story of a win or great service outcome for your constituents?
I think that's always a really good one because it personalizes things and makes it human. You know, we like human interest stories. And that can be really a great way of illustrating exactly what your organization does in a concrete way to maybe somebody that might not get exactly the nuance that you're trying to give them through kind of standard language. So having at your fingertips some quick stories that epitomize what you think is either the need or how you meet that need or that kind of thing. That's just how our human brains work. We work in pictures, and stories are great. So if you got some top of mind, please share them in these breakout rooms. And if you don't, you get one. So let me see if I can open these up.
All right. So Phil, take it away.
All right. So what did we learn in the sessions? Did anybody hear anything very interesting about the demographics of another organization, the way they presented their case? Did you hear any compelling stories? Does anybody want to share from their room a compelling story they might have heard, or an interesting way of talking about the demographics of their community, or what the mission of their organization is? And if you're shy, I don't think anybody on here is really shy, but if you could even just say something in the chat, just drop us, you heard an interesting story about this, or you have an interesting story.
We'll be doing a fundraising lab early next month, where you'll be creating your pitch. So
we'll go into detail about the techniques of turning your mission into short statements that you could use, for all kinds of settings. And it used to be a time where I actually miss those days where you could have interactions at special events with the foundations, or maybe Forefront, or different associations would have, where you'd have these big mixers, because often that was a really great way to introduce yourself to somebody. And that's just one of the signs of the changing times, that it's harder to do that.
I'm going to call on somebody because nobody has volunteered. So here, let's see.
How about Letty? I can't hear you.
Yeah, Letty's her audio is not working.
Oh, she's moved. Okay,
Yeah,
that's cool. That's
somebody
cool.
else. How about is it Litska Lucas?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Litska, how are you?
Good, good. We were talking in my group. I remember there's a gentleman and I that we were mentioning that even though we serve a lot of the Hispanic community, but especially with our organization, we were mentioning that for us it's that just even explaining and letting more the community know that one department that we actually serves more the Spanish community, that they were not shut down 5 years ago, because we still have to remind them in the community, so we can keep targeting our the community that we're trying to serve. And we were saying that because we are merged, like the Department La Voz Latina, it's merged with like the YWCA. It confuses sometimes a lot of the Hispanic community, that they just kind of see it as the YWCA, so they forget that we do have a resource for our Hispanic community, and we have a lot of resources and different programs that are targeted for them, and a lot of them even in their own language. So still today, it's it's like we're always trying to do a lot more outreach, so we can continue informing and just letting them know all the different programs that we have created, and new ones and older ones are still there too. So we keep doing that.
Got it. So it sounds like, do you have an overview of your organization? Do you guys have something like that? A document that talks about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have like all the different programs, you know, and like I said, we have a bigger program that it's for any, you know, English speakers or Spanish speakers. But then we have some that are just more targeted for those that are in their own, you know, special target language. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And so that's something that you would lift in a proposal, even though you're going to talk, you could talk about, you know, what you overall do, but then you say, this is specifically targeted for this specific population, and these are the reasons why. You give your stats, blah, 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 in that case.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. Yep.
You just bubble that up.
It shows you're being responsive, and that's really important.
Appreciate it. Yep. Exactly.
Anybody else? Let's go. Anybody else want to share?
I can go.
A good way. Yes. Thank you, Juan.
Yeah. Well, Carlos from the Chicago Workers Collaborative. I was in the group with Litska and Eugenia. We had a really good conversation. But the second question is, why is your organization uniquely suited to deal with solve pressing issues? One of the things is I was saying in our group is that our organization, it started, you know, working with temp agencies, people who work at, you know, through the temp agencies, right, factories, stuff like that. So one of the things, you know, why we uniquely suited ourselves is because most of our staff here is bilingual, and most of us have also worked in those types of jobs. So that's what makes us uniquely suited to solve, you know, some of the problems and help the, you know, our population, whether, you know, resolve issues at work, you know, or immigration issues, or even, you know, like, you know, through the program for the eviction program, or like we were saying, also we throughout the pandemic, this organization has been working really hard, informing people about their the importance of getting vaccinated, right? The health issues, passing out kits for health safety kits. So we have now all that experience. So that's why, you know, like I was saying, if we apply for grants in the future, we have all the experience, you know, whether it's the people or the skills, because we have been through that, most of us. Like we serve primarily, you know, Hispanic population, and only one person is not fully bilingual in our organization.
That's awesome. That is that you put the you in unique there, where you're saying that, listen, our staff is bilingual. It's not that you only have one you know, a lot of times you get into an organization that have maybe one or two people who are bilingual, maybe one at best. But you literally, you have a bilingual staff. So you are uniquely suited to work with the target population that you're absolutely talking about, that you want to work with. I think that's awesome. That would definitely be something that you want to make sure you highlight in your case as to why you would want to fund your organization. Phil, do you want to add anything to that?
No, other than to say that's great stuff. And it reminds me that before I, you know, in my previous life as a foundation person, I worked for the Woods Fund of Chicago and the Chicago Community Trust at different times. And I had the pleasure and the honor to work with most of the groups on this call that were around it, and saw some of their founders and early executive directors, and have always admired the work that you all did and what you do for your community. So it's really exciting to see actually another generation of people carrying on this important work. So without further ado, let's jump back into it, because we've got a lot to go over. So what are foundations? That was a question I asked myself really after years of trying to get money from them, and sometimes successfully. It always seemed like I was sending these pieces of paper to a black hole. And part of the reason I wanted to work in a foundation was to see what was on that other side and then learn something and then bring it back to people that were like me in nonprofit organizations that I had met and networked with. Back then, we had a couple of organizations. One was called Blacks in Development. The other was called Latinos in Development. And those organizations were of fundraisers for small nonprofits mostly, but African Americans and Hispanic people in the profession. And we networked. And at one time, there was a joint program that was going on at Loyola, where it was almost like a speed dating thing that Latinos in Development and Blacks in Development would do at Loyola University, and different nonprofits would come around and like speed date with program officers, metaphorically, not literally. And I don't know if those two organizations still exist or partnered, but I think that's a great kind of thing. So if somebody could mention the chat whether or not either of those organizations exist, and if that kind of thing is still going on. I know COVID and everything that's happened put a damper on a lot of kind of public gatherings, so that would make sense. But in a nutshell, foundations are tax advantage pools of money that can be used for charitable purposes, and their origins are around the amelioration of the negative effects of capitalism. I mean, if you think where we really had the rise of modern philanthropy in the United States, and the United States has a really unique history around this, is a lot of it came with the Industrial Revolution and the side effects of the Industrial Revolution. You can think about the cities, like we're in Chicago, much of downtown and what we know of now, the Magnificent Mile wasn't always so magnificent. It was like a cesspool. And all of the places where you had all this kind of wild, you had the rise of these capitalists that made lots of money, but it had terrible living conditions, especially for immigrant populations that were coming in to go into these factories. And so healthcare and just things like open sewage and open roads, all of that, the business community realized at some point, this hurts business. We want to do other things. And so we have to do a certain amount of taking care of the population. And out of that road, the settlement house movement and different kinds of charitable things, including community foundations. The first community foundation was actually in Cleveland. And I think Chicago Community Trust is the second or third. But they all came out of that era to how do we deal with these terrible side effects. Now, they get a tremendous tax advantage for setting these things up. But what they have to do as a condition is they have to give away 5% of the corpus. So think of the corpus as that big bank account. And the interest on that bank account is what they use to make grants. And all of that is really tied to their investment performance, most of it in the stock market. So a large part of what most foundations have involved with is some kind of relationship with financial asset managers working with the stock market. And that can have really interesting effects. If the stock market is way up, that can mean the foundation has more to spend. So that 3 to 5 year rolling average, it's not based on just that year. We had a great year this year. It's based, they can stretch it out. There have been times where that stock market performance was so high. I remember the first time I worked for a foundation, and it was about December, and there was a lot of extra money that they had to get rid of for their tax purposes. It just, so they brought in grantees they had previously kind of declined. And I've seen it go the other way, where it's a tight year and they have to tighten up on the money because of where they are in that rolling average. So it's important to understand that the performance of the stock market is important to look at when you think about how much money they have. And sometimes they're flush and sometimes they're not, but it's not generally based on one particular year that you might be in. It's where they are in their calculation of the rolling average. So I hope that makes sense. And I mentioned this before, but foundations are as different as snowflakes. They're not a monolith. And that's why it takes quite a bit of personal and kind of digital research. You know, you ask other people similarly such situated to you what their experience has been with this foundation, how you fit it. You talk to their program officer, and then you also read, as she talked about, Alma talked about the hack there. You know, you can look at a foundation's website and see who they fund. Do they fund any organizations just like you? And what are they funding them for? And that's another way of kind of a hack, of kind of reverse engineering from what the foundation says and who they say they fund and what they funded for, and those grant amounts. Because if their average grant amount is $25,000, you don't necessarily want to put in a proposal for $100,000, putting you way outside, and you're a new organization. That's just, you know, you got to play the game a little with a little bit more finesse than that, unless there's a compelling reason that you can beat out everybody in what everyone must understand here is a competitive process. And that's the kind of the main thing that you really have to understand about this, is that there are a lot of people looking for money, all right, at any given time. And they're all coming to these foundations, and they can't all be funded. So then when you think about foundation funding, it's generally, people think about general operating support versus program or project support. Now, general operating support is essentially where you get a check, and you can take that check, the organization take that check and use it for anything they do according to their discretion. A program and a project funding has a specific program or project budget that money must go to. And so when you report on that, you're reporting on the particular outcomes of those particular programs and projects. Now, the way you figure out whether or not you fit into one program or general operating is to look at a grant. Like I put this illustration up. Think of these circles, the kind of bluish circle and the yellow circle, as their foundation versus your organization and your missions and your programs. And when they're not connected at all, they're very different, then you don't even go about approaching them because there is no alignment. And that's what you do through the prospect research. The second example there is where there's partial mission alignment. So that orange circle inside represents the intersection between the foundation's interest and the nonprofit's interest. So that could be you're a legal service organization. This is a huge foundation that does 15 different kind of programs, but it includes legal services. And so that is where your part of connection is. And that's what your program is going to be around, those specific guidelines around that. And that is where your budgeting and all of that will be calibrated for. Then there's the cases, as I mentioned before, where that last example shows full mission alignment. That means the foundation and you are similarly situated. They only fund the kind of thing that you do, or what you do fits fully within their guidelines. And why that's important, again, has to do with budgeting and reporting, because the foundation, if it has a particular mission, it doesn't want its money to go outside of that mission, even if it's an organization they like. So if this money is for these particular programs, the organization can't use it like general operating fund and use it to pay the light bill or, you know, other kinds of staff unrelated. So I hope all of that is clear. So it's important that you know the various fundraising terms here. And I'm sure most of the folks here are familiar with these terms, these forms, which you're going to be using again as part of your package, but also to be conversant when you're talking with the foundation, because you're talking about money, you're talking about a grant, how we're going to use it, and you have to understand what these various categories are, from annual budget, that's all expenses for the whole year, your balance sheet, which shows the well-being of your organization, including its cash flows, its liabilities versus its assets. Those are usually audited statements. The kind of grants you get, other kinds of what's called unearned income, where you might have some kind of operation that brings money in, the in-kind donations where people donate services or goods to you. Those have to be reported, according to IRS specifications. And then they want to get the sense of the well-being of your organization. So if you have nonprofits are called nonprofit, it's a bit of a no-brainer in that you can have a surplus, and that surplus has to be used programmatically or put into reserves. And that's actually the situation that you want to be in. That's a strength. That's a sign of strength. That's a healthy nonprofit organization. Nonprofit organizations that only zero out every year and maybe have a deficit, depending on how old they are and how long they've been in existence, or if there's no extenuating circumstances, that could be a red flag in the funding community, because it may show lack of ability to manage a budget, that kind of thing, and that's can be negative. And it's an odd thing, because you're a nonprofit organization and you're serving your community. It's like everybody knows you need the money. Okay, so it's kind of a thing where you don't want to look. Everyone knows you need money, but you don't want to look like their money will be the last grant you get before you go out of business. Okay, nobody wants to be that person, that organization, that program officer. So if there are financial problems or issues, it's better to be upfront about them and let the program folks help you. Which is the subject of the next section, the program staff. Program people are people too. Foundation program officers are people too. They share your values. They're doing this work because it's meaningful for them, for many of them in many ways. A lot of these people have a lot of skills, and they could be in the more business sector, money-making sector, but they're in a nonprofit sector because of their heart. Okay, and they're your point of contact, and they can also be your guide and your navigator through what is can be as Amma pointed out, it can be a daunting process, especially you're doing it the first time. But it's really important to understand that these are limited resources for the way that we talk, and lots of people are coming at the person. And so a foundation, especially in times like this, is inundated with requests, and the people inside foundations are called grant makers. I think that they're as much grant deniers as they are grant makers. I mean, as a program officer, you say no multiple times more than you say yes. And that could be because there's no alignment. But it's generally because there's not enough money to give everybody money and make meaningful grants. You could give everybody that applies $1,000, and that wouldn't solve anybody's problem, right? It really wouldn't help anybody. So to keep integrity of your grant process, you have to choose, and you have to say no. And just the economics of the situation that we're in, many more people apply than are going to get grants. And that's really, we talked about the LOI process. That's what the letter of inquiry process is about, is doing a first level of screening before we do a deep dive. And what I want to caution you is that the letter of inquiry is not an automatic way of saying you're going to get money for sure. What it says is you met the first test, you made the first layer, and now you're in the pool where we're going to dive in. Okay. And generally speaking, the program officer that you're dealing with or your case is assigned to was involved in getting you in the hopper, and they like your letter of inquiry, or they think it fits, or they see that they're going to include it to go in the next round. So then that's your interface. That's the person that's going to guide you through. And so that's who you're going to really be frank with. You're going to tell them what you need. And if you got a great program officer, they're going to help you. They're going to tell you what's missing. They're going to suggest resources for you to enhance your process coming in. Because at that point, they're almost an internal salesman inside the foundation to say, you know, we're going to have to cut people, but we're not going to cut them because they meet the criteria in this way. So program staff can be your ally. The other thing that you have to understand on the flip side of that is your worth as a nonprofit. Foundations, again, they exist for a mission. They have to give this money away, but they don't have to give it away to any particular organization. They want to give it to one that's going to make them look good, enhance their mission prerogatives. So you have worth as a nonprofit. All of the discussions that you were having in the last breakout session about what you do and how you affect people, those stories and all that, well, that is the stuff that foundations don't have access to. They're not on the ground. These things, they're kind of can be in an ivory tower in terms of the institution. You're the one that tells them how things really are. You tell them how it's really working in the community and what doesn't work. And so you have to be bold about that. If they're the foundation, even though you're trying to get money from them, everyone understands that you all know stuff that we don't know because you're really there. And and what I have found is really some of the most effective fundraisers, particularly at the executive director level, are people that are they're kind of tough. They're a little snarky. They don't, they don't suffer fools lightly. They don't go into the foundation negotiation as a victim. They go in there knowing their worth, and they're not shy about pushing back when that is appropriate. They're not obnoxious. Well, some of them are, but they know how to use these tools. And your leadership is your brand. It's your brand, especially if the executive director is a founder or one of the founders of the organization, has been around a long time, it has a lot of contacts with people. They're your brand. It's like people know them, and that's really important to consider.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
I know Shirag had a question about what is choosing between good and good. So Shirag, it's like what Philip was saying, that, but just think about like the letter of intent gets you in to the door. Now you're sitting in the room with all these other folks. All of you are pretty good at this point because you've all passed that first litmus test. Now we need to see who's gooder, or who's best. So that's what they're saying about choosing between good and good. Everybody in the room at this point has something of value, of worth, of service that's worthy of funding. But who's going to get it? Because the money only goes so far. Everybody can't get it. So you do have to choose between good and good.
I think that's an excellent question. It really leads into this slide, because so when you're doing this good and good, this decision between, because really what's bad, okay? And bad means it doesn't fit our guidelines, or we think there's bad performance or something like that. So we weed them out in the letter of inquiry process. Now you've got a bunch of groups that are good. All right. And you have to differentiate between them. And so these are the ways that you're told that you differentiate. And they're all true. It's all, there's quality in your materials, the things you do. That's very important. But what they don't tell you about is all these other things, the brand I talked about of your organization and its executive director, where you live, where your organization lives, who it serves, what the politics in that community are. If that's on the front burner socially, it's something that can change overnight. Like, I remember when the first time when there was the Rodney King riots, there weren't even in Chicago. That resulted in all kinds of money from Chicago foundations being thrown around for anything that moved. And unfortunately, a lot of groups got organizational money back then that really wouldn't meet the criteria in a regular time. So it was a little confusing. But, sometimes it's just what's going on in society. The other thing is critical relationships. Your board and the board of the foundations, your leadership, there are relationships all in that. And I've seen the difference in some grant decisions between good and good really come down to, well, the board of the person in this organization knows that organization, knows that executive director. It's in their neighborhood, or they like it for some reason. And I've seen them exert themselves in the grant process. That's human. I mean, and we're in Chicago. So, so relationships and all that matter, and it can influence stuff. But you're not going to be told that right off. There's a lot of things you're not going to be told. You're not going to be told if necessarily, there's bad blood. They won't even tell you that. There could be somebody that doesn't like your executive director that's on this board, and they're an influential board member, and they're just not going to make the grant. And that is something that it is not ethical for a program officer to divulge what might have been private communication, but it affects it. That's just the reality of the world we live in. So you have to understand that these relationships are at play. Certainly the politics, Chicago, Springfield, they work very similar. There's a lot of power at play that plays into whether your community is something that is on the front burner for policymakers and funders. And funders and policymakers work hand in hand. Public policy is like the setting, the context for all of the work we do. All of the work we do is within the setting of public policy. And then that kind of politics and political arrangement works its way into the grant process, so that everything that I've described, politics at its core is the distribution of scarce resources. And so nothing could be more emblematic of what a foundation is about. So you got to have strategies for success. We're going to include organizations here. Again, make sure that you understand their relationship with the stock market. And we'll put a link to Forefront in the chat, but I think most of the people on the call know Forefront. And then we are nearing at the end of our time, so we want to respect your time and just say, as we're checking out, if you can put in the chat what you got out of this session. Again, we have follow-up sessions to this where we get more in detail, both in terms of the budgeting, that's coming up next. And then we have the grassroots fundraising, where we get into other areas. And then finally, we're going to do a lab where we do some demonstration things. So it's a lot of interesting stuff, and I think a lot of useful, practical stuff. So let us know what you think. Here's the evaluation link. We really want to know what you think. So you can even start to go there and click the link, and that really helps us calibrate and figure out how to do the next sessions better. And we're working on the technology all the time. And then this is when we'll meet next. Please register for the next sessions. There's a lot coming up, and we want to have the best opportunity to get you all the best practices around raising money, running your organizations, and approaching funders and other donors in a comprehensive way in this very challenging time. So I just want to thank you for your attention and everything. Alma, do you have something you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that everybody should fill out the eval before. I just put it in the link for everyone. So please follow that link to fill out the eval. There was a couple of questions. There was a question from Letty asking about what is the percentage or type of financial stability are they looking for that you know of, or that you think you've learned over time? So in terms of what, like, if your budget is 90% soluble, or if you're in deficit versus in the black.
Okay, so what I would say is it's kind of on a spectrum. So deficits happen. They can happen. Are you carrying them over? And then what is there a plan? If you have to report that you have a deficit, then you have to be proactive. Is the plan? Our board is taking these actions to make that thing happen. Okay, so it's all about that, because people understand, particularly in this time, that finances are tough. So as long as you're not carrying year after year of a deficit, and your board has a plan and strategy that is written out and they're following, that doesn't have to be a killer. So it's all about proportionality. The other thing I think, in a lot of groups in this cohort, by necessity, they might have one big grant or a couple of grants that are pulling everything. And everybody understands that in your early trajectory. So your job will be diversifying that without losing that anchor funding. The more diverse you are, the more that shows strength. Because if that funder goes away or reduces, that means you're vulnerable. And again, foundations kind of have a group think that's a little weird, where they don't want to be the funder that's holding the bag if an organization goes under. So there's a difference between being growing and developing and being shaky. Okay, shaky is like they don't have the systems. When I go, they don't report back. This looks shaky, and there might be some good things there, but you don't want to look shaky, because who wants to put their money behind something shaky? So it's a competitive process. It's a competitive process that all of you all can win, and at some level you have shown that you can win because you're part of this cohort. So that's the good news. And the bad news for our country right now is we're in a lot of crisis, and there's going to be ups and downs with the stock market. But the general stock market has been going up. It's been going crazy. So there's never been more money available than now. But there's never been more need and thus competition. So.
And you just have to, I'm looking at what Juan asked. Can you please elaborate more about importance of brand and usage in a grant? Your brand, it's like, who are you? What sets you apart? That's what gives you that competitive edge.
Right. I mean, you have that language, and don't be afraid to not be too dry with language. You don't want to be too dry. You're selling. You are selling this thing. You are important. You do something that nobody else does. You're situated, your community needs this. So it's without being like bombastic, you can be descriptive and pointed and make your case.
Mhm.
Okay, so that is a something at your disposal.
And the last
But your
question.
brand,
Oh,
your brand again, like it just depends on. There's your brand in your community, but when you're doing grant work, you're dealing with a subset of people called the foundation world. And so the reputation of your executive director and board is what is a big part of the brand, because that's who they know. And
Right.
your executive director's reputation and how you are in the press. Have there been any scandals? There many times as a program officer, there would be scandals that might happen with a nonprofit. Somebody on, something bad happened. And you all are dealing with legal services, so there can be perceptions about even the whole field, right? But your brand has to be, is that executive director a person of integrity? The board people, those are good people. They have good integrity. It's that kind of thing. And all of that makes up your brand.
And the last one, Shirag asked, do foundations already know they are going to deny orgs before anything is submitted based on what they know about the organization, i.e. bad blood? Well, yes, sometimes.
and that's what I was saying. Sometimes that is, and sometimes the program officer doesn't know until they bring it and they get some pushback, and then you have to dive in it. Like I'm saying, it's rarely where somebody just spits it out. Oh, that doesn't happen like that. These are sophisticated folks. I think what's more common is the other way. And that's what you all have to think about this competition. When you're applying to the foundation, there are already people getting grants there. Mm-hmm. And they still want that money. They want their stuff renewed. Or even if they're not renewing a grant, they still want grant. They've written that into their budget for the next year, unless they've been told you get 3 years and then you got to sit out or something, But a lot you could keep applying. So an organization that is known and already jumped through the hoops and maybe has good relations with the foundation obviously has an advantage. Unless there's somebody that's been there so long that they're trying to cycle them out. So it's much more that there's ones that are kind of almost incumbents, given that if they're really tightly aligned with the mission of this foundation. But it's hard to know, really, and most program officers, if they're being honest, they're trying to find new. Your board members a lot of times are trying to find new. What is the new? Okay, we do these, we've done these. Who out there that we don't know about? And that's your opportunity.
Absolutely. Yep. That's where you get in. That's where you get in the door. And that's where brand counts. And that's where your pitch counts, your case statement counts. I say you have to cross those T's, dot those I's, make sure that you have the A+ proposal. Don't skirt the edges. Don't cut any corners. Answer everything. Put everything.
And imparting, because we got to get off, I would say, so you get a no. Because given these odds, you can get no's. You got to go into what kind of no was that? Was that a no that's a never? You just don't fit, you're not in? Was that a no, not now? If you come back at a different time, we have less money this year or whatever, this is a no. But if you change this or you do this, it can win. That is an opportunity to get the relationship with the program officer that we're talking about. They'll tell you no, you might get a letter, then call them up or send them an email. I'd like to talk to you about if there's a way, and most of them will be very frank with you at that point. So remember, no doesn't always mean no. It could be no maybe. It could be hell no, or it could be, well, maybe next time.
You want to find out what no it is.
You want to
Always
find out the no.
Always follow up with the funder.
It's kind of like dating.
Yep.
You have no chance with me.
With something, just find out. It could have been that you omitted something, so they had to put you in a different pile. But now,
Exactly. Or you were late. Don't be late.
Don't be late. Don't be late. I mean, foundations, call them. You might be able to, jigger something, but with other public
There's no
government grants, you're late, you're late. They're not even,
I wouldn't even play nowadays. It's the economy's so tight. There's such a need. So, early's better than late.
All right. Well, thank you all for your wonderful engagement, your wonderful attention. Please don't forget to fill out go to the evaluation and fill those out before you leave. It'd be greatly appreciated. And we hope to see all of you or many of you on the next upcoming grassroots fundraising training that's coming up next week.
Yes, that is really going to be great. Grassroots fundraising. We're really going to get into the things outside of foundations. We concentrate on foundations so much because they give big blocks of money, but really in terms of your sustainability as an organization going forward and that diversity of funding we were talking about, a lot of it's going to come through the kind of grassroots individual annual fund kind of thing. And we've got an expert here in Alma, and then there's little old me. So great to talk to you guys. Good to see your faces. Let us know in the chat. We're going to share the chat with you. Post, and if you've got song recommendations, because we've been having some hot songs, and my playlist has expanded since we started this program. Okay. So this is really hot. So we've got songs to think about. Put those in here and put them in your registration for the next session.